I want everything about my house off the internet!
This is Christian Weston Chandler, previously known as Christopher before an animatronic bear said his name wrong, which led him to have it changed. Soon to be known as Christine when she transitioned to be a woman, but online trolls call them Chris Chan. He's demanding a video showing his hoarding situation be taken off the internet so that his elderly parents won't have their house condemned by the government. Who would report him? Well, that would be a dedicated group of internet users who have cataloged this man's life for the past 15 years, making him one of the most well-documented people in human history, with his wiki containing thousands of pages. This includes a Nickelodeon cartoon character stealing his girlfriend, a doppelganger trying to steal his identity, him being catfished by a dozen different women, the destruction of his PlayStation 3 for a fake bounty, money stolen from his bank account, his house catching on fire, the macing of a GameStop employee, running over a store owner with his car, getting tricked by the creator of the Super Mario Bros., and having his character Sonic Chew stolen by a British sports commentator. Sonic Chew is a hybrid of Sonic and Pikachu that Chris created an entire comic series for. This character is also his real-life alter ego that he believes will one day bring about an interdimensional merge that will reveal him to be the reincarnation of Jesus. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's go back to the beginning. So for years now, people have been asking me to do a video talking about Chris Chan, and the problem is I just never knew where to begin on the subject. So for the past month now, I've been trying to get in touch with Chris Chan in any way I could. But after all that failed, I messaged Coppets. He responded right away and asked me if I wanted to do an interview with Chris Chan, and the answer to that was absolutely yes. So within a few days, I get a cameraman and I am heading down a couple hours, making a road trip out of it to meet the notorious Chris Chan in person. And this is the street. Is that it?
I mean, that looks...
Sonic Chew! Look!
Sonic
Zoom in on the license plate.
Hold on. See if I can get that. Hello! Hi!
Hey guys.
Hey!
How's it going?
How are you?
Art, is that right? How's it going, Christian and Christine?
I'm Jesse.
Jesse, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Christine, hello. I'm Jesse.
Yeah, Jesse.
Nice to meet you.
Alright, suppose we can go inside.
Yeah, let's go
in?
inside.
Okay.
We're gonna do the interview downstairs.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Downstairs.
Okay.
Quiet down! Quiet down! Quiet! 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 Alright, everybody's inside.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well, this is very nice.
Yeah, this is the room where it was
This is where it all
Sonic Chew. Those dogs are screaming bloody.
Yeah. They calm down after a little bit sometimes.
Is that thing on right now?
Yeah, is that okay?
Oh, hello. Hello out there, YouTube, internet, all that. Hello. Hello. Hope you're all having a good day. There's your intro. Kinda.
All right. Yeah, kinda. Good enough.
Even prior to his birth, Chris's parents' relationship gave many reasons for concern. Bob and Barbara Chandler were aged 54 and 40 respectively. At this later time in a couple's life, most are dissuaded by medical professionals from having children. This is for a variety of reasons. As many studies have shown, such an age difference would leave a large generational gap between parent and child. In some cases, this can put the child at risk of growing up socially stunted, as from a biological standpoint, they also have a larger chance of facing health complications at birth. More specific to the Chandlers as individuals, however, was the hastiness of their relationship. Prior to Chris's birth, the two had been married for only 2 years. They'd wed fled quickly in a bid to escape their previous marriages. Consequently, they held strained relationships with their previous families, with Barbara's in particular being intense. Additionally, they were both alcoholics, having even first met each other in a bar. Of course, that's not to say that their family unity was doomed from the start. In spite of these imperfections, it was far from unsalvageable. But these details are important in establishing that from their newborn's conception, it was an uphill battle. Such a dynamic requires a consistent and active effort to maintain normalcy, one that the Chandlers may have not been ready to face. Christopher Weston Chandler was born in Charlottesville, Virginia on February 24th, 1982. In those first few months of life, Chris was an average toddler. His first word, according to his mother, was monkey, a rather cute mispronunciation of mommy. However, it wasn't long before problems would arise. To start, in spite of having a newborn child, they continued their nightly routine of going out drinking. To babysit Chris, as well as his half-brother Cole, who lived with them at the time, they appointed Rochelle, a woman who lived in the same neighborhood as the family. Chris's sibling later recalled that it was apparent to him, even as a youngster, that she was unfit to be caring for children. As the story goes, one night in August of 1983, Rochelle became irritated with Christopher after he interrupted her phone call. She opted to punish the toddler by locking him in a room by himself for the rest of the night. Christopher, who was just 1.5 years old at the time, was traumatized to the point that when he was rescued, he refused to speak entirely. In fact, he regressed to the point of only communicating through screaming and crying for the next 6 years. To compensate for this newfound aphasia, his parents began taking him to attend speech therapy classes, which is where he was first diagnosed as being autistic, with the doctor predicting that he would likely never write his own name, let alone make it to high school. In a strange twist of events, Bob and Barbara would continue leaving Christopher with the delinquent babysitter for the next few years, likely so they could continue their tradition of late-night benders. This led his stepbrother, Cole, to attribute Chris's early muteness as largely being the fault of their neglect, a trend that would only worsen with time. Though the assertion that neglect was the source of his autism is baseless, the babysitter's supposed actions undeniably exacerbated Chris's condition. And in spite of its immediate consequences, they failed to take many basic preventative measures. In 1985, a new family moved into the Chandlers' neighborhood. With a child of their own, the families quickly became cordial with each other. This naturally led to Christopher becoming playmates with the couple's daughter, Sarah Hammer. Chris has a fond view of the years he spent with Sarah, reflecting upon them by proclaiming her to be a lifelong best friend. Unfortunately, the young girl would often pull mean-spirited pranks on the autistic child. An example of this was when she once convinced Chris that the cartoon character, Casper the Friendly Ghost, lived in the crawl space under her home. Once the young boy had crawled under the residence to look for himself, she proceeded to lock him in, trapping Chris until her father came to the rescue. While one could argue that events such as these implicate her as a foe, Chris insists far more positive than negative experiences. He dismissed them as just childish pranks, overshadowed by his cherished memories of them playing. According to Chris himself, it was her that brought him out of his autistic social shell for the time. At home, Christopher's life was surrounded by music and pop culture. Unable to speak, he spent much of his time consuming children's entertainment such as Sesame Street, Care Bears, and Transformers. Bob even purchased a Commodore 64 home computer, sparking Chris's lifelong interest in technology and video games. His father was proud of Chris for being able to operate the personal computer before he could even speak, programming his own games on the console by age 6. Accompanying the Chandlers was their pet dog Patty, who Chris had picked out himself from his Aunt Karina's litter. At this point, his home life wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. Unfortunately, things would only get worse when he began to attend school. The year was 1987, when he was dropped at the front door of Greene County Primary School. With Chris's struggles to communicate, this marked the beginning of many obstacles he'd have to overcome in his academic career. In spite of this, Bob was optimistic. In order to inspire his son, he penned a heartfelt letter detailing his expectations.
The reason for this open letter to you, which will grow as time goes on, is that I know now that I, at best, haven't much time left to share myself with you. particularly to share my things, my dreams, and my thoughts with you at a time in the future when you will be able to understand. Remember to use my things and carry on my dreams if you want to.
A distinct characteristic of the letter is that it's written informally. It's meant to be read as if he and Chris were speaking face to face, a clearly intimate discussion. Bob goes on to explain personal matters such as his previous marriages and what he sought to avoid when raising Chris.
I didn't plan my life. I just took it as it came along. I seem to have had no control over it. It always came along with what was right for me. Look at me 8 years ago in 1979, when I was really down and out and ready to cash in my chips with heart problems that I didn't even know about. Your mother, Barbara Ann, helped me through the rough spots, and together we had you. Now I really had something to live for. No better things or events could have happened to me. We've come a long way in the last 8 years. Together we have built a whole new life with an exciting set of dreams.
But by far the most important message Bob wanted Chris to take away was the importance of legacy. He recounts the story of how he carelessly broke his late grandfather's straight razor, an item that held great sentimental value to him, and how it caused him to realize the respect he ought to hold for their memories. From this, he hoped his son would cherish any future inherited belongings he might be given by his father, such as his prize stamp collection.
Do not be in such a hurry to use, play, or work with these things. First, learn all about them, how to use them and enjoy them, their value, and how you can thoughtlessly waste their value, then enjoy them as I have. As a boy, my greatest dream was to have inherited things from my mother, father, grandparents, etc. All of my books, stamp collections, and records. My dreams for you, your mother, and other personal things.
This idealized new life he wished to build with Chris and Barbara would culminate in the backyard of the Chandlers' house. In 1989, Bob created a plaque and placed it on their backyard shed, proclaiming it as the dreaming studio of Mr. C and Little C. It's here that he'd attempt to teach Chris how to create things. Evidently, the dreaming studio didn't last long enough to make a true impact on Chris though, because in spite of the clear sentimental value Bob placed on his belongings, Chris would later sell his father's cherished stamp collection in 2017, using the profits to purchase toys. While on the subject of games, when examining the Chandlers' Christmas of 1989, it can be discovered that Christopher received a Nintendo Game Boy from Santa, his second ever video game console. It was that same year that the young boy purportedly began speaking again, with the help of his speech therapist. By age 7, Chris had defied the professional's original expectations of him, an accomplishment that he'd wear with pride for the rest of his academic career. Soon after regaining his voice, for unknown reasons, Christopher was transferred from Greene County Primary School to Nathaniel Greene Elementary to attend the 4th grade. Although he was still riding off the success of regaining his speaking abilities, the administrators at this new school were not as impressed. While we'll never know for sure what happened there, legal documents indicate that the district had attempted to place him at a separate special education school, a decision that Bob and Barbara fought tooth and nail. It's speculated that they felt Chris's recent successes proved he didn't need the accommodations. Additionally, given their advanced age, they likely had a different perception of special ed than what was offered at the time. Regardless, the parents escalated the conflict. Chris recounts his experience at the school as one of frequent physical abuse, notoriously recalling an incident in which 5 facility members, including the school principal, pinned him down to the floor and recorded his cries on an audio cassette tape. Chris attributes this alleged assault to having been motivated by lust, going so far as to accuse the principal of being a pedo. He claims that the man had him sit on his lap, before whispering quote-unquote offensive things to the young child. However, given the detail that the alleged assault was recorded, some have speculated it's much more likely that Chris had thrown a tantrum, and facility members recorded his cries as evidence that he couldn't function in a mainstream institution. Upon learning of the incident, Bob filed legal action against the administration, causing Chris to be homeschooled during the proceedings. The case was eventually dropped in 1994. At this point, with the young boys' mainstream enrollment still in jeopardy, Bob and Chris moved to Chesterfield County so they could legally attend a different school district. This forced Bob to retire, becoming a stay-at-home father. In order to continue working her job, Barbara remained at their home in Ruckersville, though she would come to visit them every weekend. The decision to keep Chris in public school is perhaps the single most significant turning point regarding his early development. The failure to provide accommodations for his special needs led to feelings of ostracization and appeared to hinder Chris's social development. Jumping forward to the Christmas season of 1992, Bob and Chris made a stop at the Regency Square Mall. At this shopping center was an animatronic creature named Leonard Bernstein, who conducted a symphony orchestra as part of a musical program. The animatronic was designed to be interactive, engaging with the audience in conversation through its human operator. The crowd was light that Thursday afternoon, causing Christopher to be able to have a largely one-on-one conversation with the robot between songs. Chris was spellbound, leading him and Bob to watch the performance for the next hour. In the midst of their conversation, Leonard Bernstein asked Christopher for his name. When Chris responded, the operator must have misheard him, as he began referring to the child as Christian. Following that interaction, the mistake stuck, with Chris going so far as to request his name be changed from Christopher to Christian. Oddly enough, Bob and Barbara agreed, and had it legally changed the following year. With this brand new first name bestowed upon him by an animatronic bear, the now adolescent boy continued his education at Providence Middle School in the fall of 1993. He later described this campus as being much more pleasant than Nathaniel Green, and attributes his happiness there to a teacher named Mrs. Sanford, who is to date the only educator that Chris has singled out favorably. She helped the child develop social skills and instructed him on how to cope with the verbal bullying he endured. Upon his graduation from Providence, Mrs. Sanford wrote a personal letter addressed to Chris, in which she gave him heartfelt advice and bid her well wishes.
If you show people where your weak points are located, then they will know how to push your button. If you never show them, they will never know. Do your very best at Manchester, put your best foot forward, and treat others as you wish to be treated. Love, Mrs. Sanford.
16-bit arcade graphics.
Of all the pop culture movements in the 90s, one of the most prominent was the mascot with attitude trend, and the most notable example of this was Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog. Debuting in 1991, the blue blur is most notable for his extreme speed. Made specifically to appeal to Western markets, the character was a massive success, quickly receiving his own syndicated Saturday morning cartoon in 1993. To promote the release of this new TV series, Sega hosted a contest known as the Sonic the Hedgehog Watch and Win Sweepstakes, in which they challenged viewers to write down what Sonic said at the end of each episode. Upon mailing in their transcriptions, they would then be entered into a drawing, where they'd have a chance to win a $1,000 shopping spree at KB Toys. As an early adopter of the Sonic craze, Christian entered the contest, and as luck would have it, when the winners were selected in February of 1994, he actually won.
What I had to do was exactly watch Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, and I'd listen to what Sonic says at the end of it, and write it down for a whole week, and then I had to mail it in, and I had to be drawn out of a hat, and I just won.
This victory marked the beginning of Christian's obsession with Sonic, who would go on to become his professed lifelong hero. And after the high of this spending spree, it wouldn't be the last time he entered a contest. By the spring of 1996, the family was once again together as Barbara retired from her job to live with her husband and son in Chesterfield County. This wouldn't last long, however, as according to Chris, some of their neighbors began spreading harmful rumors regarding the family. While what happened has never been specified, the situation was apparently vitriolic enough to cause them to relocate to an apartment complex just outside of Richmond. But being immersed in his pop culture pastimes, Chris was largely unfazed by these developments. It was that September that Christian finally began his first year at Manchester High, a period he would retrospectively deem the happiest times of his life. At this school is where the creation of his very first Sonic the Hedgehog fan character, Bionic the Hedgehog, was conceived. Spending much of his freshman year as a water boy for the varsity basketball team, he came up with the character after being hit in the head with a basketball while he was daydreaming about Sega's gaming mascot. It is rather fittingly an orange recolor of Sonic that likes to play sports. This 9th grade year would also mark the beginning of his passive love quest, developing a major crush on a cheerleader he'd met during practice. After befriending the young lady, he quickly confessed that he had feelings for her, to which she politely turned him down. In contrast to his time at Providence, Chris's years at Manchester High were filled with far more conflict. In sophomore year, Christian was forcibly assigned to take the special education bus after a petty conflict with another student. According to Chris, he and another teen would race every day to see who could exit the vehicle first. This competition escalated, eventually culminating in the boy punching Chris in order to beat him out the door. However, like many of Chris's recollections from this period, what actually occurred is rather unclear. Across his various recountings of the bus incident, Chris has contradicted himself numerous times. He claimed that he both did and didn't fight back, and also went back and forth on whether or not his glasses had been broken. What has remained consistent, however, is his adamance that he was blameless. He bemoaned that in spite of instigating the fight, the other boy quote-unquote got off scot-free. Regardless of the truth, it was because of this conflict that he was removed from the mainstream busing system, and forced to ride with who he rudely described as the slow in the minds. At this point, it's worth discussing Chris's particular distaste towards the developmentally disabled, one that illustrates the ableism instilled in him by his parents. It's clear at this age, Chris uncritically took the words of authority figures to heart. In what are typically the years of rebellion for most teens, Chris was remarkably obedient. This can be observed rather transparently in his first self-produced video titled Song of Christian. In this clip, Chris goes on multiple tangents about grievances he holds with his peers, such as their use of vulgar language.
Of course, you're not talking about those despicable, rude words they got there. I mean, they're all boop and son of a boop. You understand what I'm talking about? I mean, that just really ticks me off. But you should never ever do. I mean, it's just rude. Very rude. I mean, I'm just sick of it. I mean, yeah.
This would only be the start of Chris's self-produced recordings.
It's Alvin and the Chipmunks. Let's give him a big hand.
Yeah, return when you do like that, boy. You did it. What are you doing? Okay.
Hello. My name is Barbara Chandler, and I'm calling to request a song for my husband for his birthday.
No kidding.
His name is Bob Chandler, and he's 71 years old today.
No kidding.
And the song I would like to request is A Bushel and a Peck.
Bushel and a peck, a hug around the neck for a 71-year-old man?
I think so.
As Christian entered his junior year, the maturity one would expect from a high school student didn't seem to be developing. In a mock radio broadcast Chris recorded for fun, his mother humors him as if he's a child, while he pretends to have guests such as Alvin and the Chipmunks on the program. Of his time at Manchester High, 11th grade has the most documentation. Recovered assignments illustrate how he performed at school, and the actual quality of his work against the grades he received. One of the first leaked projects is dated October 29th, 1998. Intended to be an icebreaker activity for his chemistry class, Chris notably refused to talk to any male students, leaving all their spaces blank. In spite of his woes of loneliness, things weren't entirely hopeless. It was in that class he would become lab partners with two female students, Kelly Andes and Sarah Bevel. They would be some of his first quote-unquote gal pals, a term Chris later coined to describe all of his female friends. Chris has reasoned that his autism test found that he got along better with women rather than men. Chris's gal pals would make up the entirety of his social life throughout high school, to varying degrees of sincerity. Perhaps the most earnest of these was Tiffany Gowan, who sat with Christian every day during lunch. It's worth noting that during this time, Chris was extremely naive on relationships and sex. He apparently was unaware of the idea of dating until he turned 21, a testament to his shelteredness. Evidently, the sit-down talk of puberty never came, but where Chris's parents failed, entertainment took its place, a trend that would be recurrent throughout his life. As Chris recalls, after unlocking the parental controls on his television, he accidentally came across a suggestive scene in a film and had his first erection. Part of the known curriculum Chris took that year was a cooking class, evidenced by recovered kitchen safety worksheets he'd completed. In an assignment titled Safety First, he notes, "What could happen if you plug too many appliances into one outlet? It could start a fire." Christian also took child development classes, which included the activity of simulated parenthood. This is done through a variety of different methods, be it an interactive infant doll or, in Chris's case, an empathy belly, an attachable pregnancy stomach meant to enable students to understand the effects of carrying a child.
The belly made it uncomfortable for me to cross my legs, and when my legs were separated, it put pressure on my private part, which gave me a strange, weird feeling. So, it was quite an experience while I had a belly like a pregnant woman.
Despite bizarrely admitting to the teacher that the device gave him an erection, he still received a perfect 30 out of 30 grade.
So tell me, why do you like Pokemon?
I don't know.
You're not sure why you like it, but you do, right?
Yeah.
Gotta catch 'em all. Pokemon.
In 1996, the first ever entries in the Pokemon franchise were released to the Game Boy in Japan and quickly evolved into a pop culture phenomenon. Within the first 2 years of its debut, the franchise received its own trading card game and anime series. And it wasn't long after this merchandising boom that the phenomenon began taking over the West. Due to the series' popularity, in 1998, the Pokemon TV show made its debut in the United States, with the games following soon after. It's unknown exactly when Chris discovered Pokemon, but when he did, he immersed himself with the universe almost as deeply as Sonic. At the same time as the Poke craze, Chris was taking Spanish classes in high school, where he often incorporated his love of video games into assignments. In a project dated February 8th, 1999, Chris illustrates his Spanish vocabulary by translating the names of characters from both Sonic the Hedgehog and Pokemon. This would be his earliest known reference to the franchise. It was this same month that Chris Chan would celebrate his 17th birthday. To commemorate, he produced a drawing of his character, Bionic the Hedgehog, holding a flag proclaiming, "I fought my autism, and I won." It was also that day that he would produce Espanolic. This character would later become one of the first entries in his line of original Pokemon cards, eventually amassing enough to create an entire Pokedex, which he dubbed the Wall of Originals. Of these homemade cards, standouts include Chikachu, a female Pikachu who can only deal damage when accompanied by a boyfriend, Flashbulb, a flashlight Pokemon, Compufrog, a frog made from computer code, and of course we can't forget Plotistic, a plant that's on the spectrum. As Chris continued to express his fascination with the Pokemon franchise, he soon created the first version of Quick's Pokesite. CWC are the initials of Christian's full name, which he is unusually proud of due to its ability to be pronounced as Quick. This webpage would only last a few months before being replaced in July by Chris's second, more amateurish Pokesite developed entirely in Notepad. Entering his final year of high school, Chris began this last hurrah by writing a short Pokemon fanfiction. Titled How the Pokemon Came Into Our Pokeballs, it was completed for an English assignment asking students to invent their own myth. Unlike his previous writings, his English teacher actually enjoyed this one. Sometime this same year, Chris also began volunteering at the local Books A Million as an assistant gym leader for their Pokemon trading card league. His staffing role was captured in a segment by Richmond NBC affiliate WWBT, showcasing him dressed up at the store as Ash Ketchum.
I'll put out my Dragonair, even though it has 60 damage on it. Oh boy. And now it has 3 energy on it. Slam attack.
With the end of the millennia, Christian was the same as he'd ever been. In fact, his obsession with the media was only worsening. He seemingly began showcasing his Pokesite around school, with various teachers and friends signing his guest book. February of his senior year would be an especially productive month for Christian Weston Chandler. That Valentine's Day, he published a poem to commemorate the event, titled Valentine's Day Hymn. While a cheerful celebration of another couple's love, this attitude would not last. Just a few days after this, Chris celebrated his 18th birthday. In attendance were Chris's parents, his stepbrother, and his gal pals from school. One of the only times Chris would interact with them outside of class. He would later reminisce on this being one of the best days of his life. With high school soon coming to a close, this seemed like a great memory to end this chapter of Chris's life on, but it would turn out he still had one more trick up his sleeve. In March, Christian was instructed to create an album cover as an assignment for his computer graphics class. One of the restrictions, however, was that students could not use any copyrighted materials. Given his obsession with pop culture, which bled into everything he produced, Chris struggled with the project's requirement of originality. This was when he had an epiphany. In order to circumvent the copyrights held by Sega and Nintendo, Christian invented Sonichu, a hybrid of the characters Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog. He recalls imagining the character after lunch on that fateful day of March 17th.
I drew Sonichu on paper from imagination. Then I drew him on my currently open Photoshop program. After checking with Miss Chalifo and my father, who is big on copyrights and whatnot, Sonichu was legal then and still is, and only mine. So, soon after, the CD cover was made, printed, and passed with an A+ grade.
Upon this hybrid character's inception, things would never be the same. Now with his own quote-unquote original creation, Sonichu took the forefront of all of his creative endeavors. The next month, he created a Sonichu sweatshirt and gave it to one of his gal pals as a birthday gift. He also began producing dozens of Sonichu variant Pokemon cards. 5 months after this, he even launched a Sonichu site to succeed his Pokesite. And it wasn't long after that, he began drawing short comics featuring his mascot. In May, Chris attended his school's senior prom with his mother. Upon arriving, one of his gal pals saw this and felt sorry for him, so she asked him for a dance.
To be one with my crowd, I bought a pair of tickets, but I went there with my mother. But then I realized I was still an outcast because I stood out more like a lonesome wallflower. But that night, my trusted peppermint patty type gal pal, Tiffany Gowan, asked me to dance with her. I hesitated at first, but she grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. We danced for what felt like hours.
In April, the 18-year-old began a self-documentary project for class titled A Week with Christian Chandler. It provides valuable insight to everyday life during those high school years, as he admits to falling asleep in classes on a regular basis. It also notes that he attends several behavioral adjustment programs, and proceeds to document several of his creations. Most notable is the City Room, which is an early version of what would later be known as Quickfill. It is a miniature city made from the pieces of Chris's various Lego kits and other memorabilia. It was here that he revealed that his family was moving back to their house in Ruckersville. According to Chris, his parents had failed to sell the home and would have stayed in Richmond had they succeeded. On June 15th, Christian graduated from Manchester High School. In spite of placing on the honor roll, for Chris the celebration was not ceremonious. Before receiving their diplomas, an award ceremony was held to recognize the school's gifted students. Chris became jealous after not being given an award for his art class assignments.
During the early award ceremony, I was a little thrilled to get a star for my grades. But then I find out that I am outshined in my creative skills because those people do not appreciate the time and effort I took into making Sonichu. I was a high-functioning autistic boy who came way beyond out of his social shell, only to get zilch, nada, sip, a big fat zero.
When it came time to actually receive his diploma, Chris went up without making eye contact with anyone, going so far as to slap away the presenter's hand when they reached out for a congratulatory handshake. He then ran off and found a table isolated enough to cry alone. It wasn't simply jealousy that had overwhelmed him that day, but rather the realization he was leaving behind the quote, best circle of friends he ever had. As mentioned before, Chris seldom hung out with his gal pals outside of high school, and the end of his time at Manchester largely meant the end of his social life as he knew it. The high school graduation has since become a point of trauma for Chris, as he felt it marked the end of the best years of his life. The thing is, what he remembers from his high school years is an extremely romanticized version of events that didn't include the manipulation those around him participated in to help him make it through. He fondly recalls being an honor roll student, though teachers often gave him higher grades than he probably deserved. He liked to see himself as an engaged pupil, though slept through many of his classes. He had friendships, but they always seemed to end when the bell rang. Speaking of friends, let's take for example one of Chris's gal pals from middle school, the girl next door who would often hang out with him at the bus stop and near their home. Chris interpreted their time together as genuine camaraderie, when in fact she had been paid by Bob to essentially babysit him. On top of this, there has been speculation that his father had a meeting with the principal of Manchester High, which resulted in school staff bringing together upstanding girls in Chris's grade to befriend and protect him from the horrors of high school, meaning that the gal pals were also a result of behind-the-scenes meddling by his parents. Perhaps what makes this period of life so mesmerizing to Chris is that it was a time of innocence, when he was still largely getting away with being oblivious to the world. An era where his parents could still feasibly shelter him as he developed an over-reliance on children's entertainment to compensate. And no matter how superficial the relationships were, they still were friendships to him. His gal pals were the one thing standing between Chris and solitude. After high school, as Chris had guessed, he'd lose contact with them, but most could have never guessed how far he would descend into isolation. The weather was dark and rainy that graduation day as the now adult Chris sobbed by himself in his graduation gown. When Barbara and Tiffany found him, they comforted the emotional young man. His father, however, was less forgiving with how his son had behaved. Perhaps he read the writing on the wall then and there and realized the futility of his family's future. Now out of high school, Chris finally had the independence that's afforded to adults. With his free time, Chris began volunteering as an assistant Pokemon gym leader at the local Toys R Us trading card club in Charlottesville. According to first-hand accounts, he often attempted to use his homemade Pokemon cards in regular play, which were unbalanced and overpowered. Christian also launched SonicChew.com, though it was largely neglected. His family, now back under the same roof, began attending the newly established Grace Baptist Church, and in August, Chris began his first year at Piedmont, Virginia Community College. He was set to graduate with an associate's degree in 2 years. With all of his high school friends left behind, Chris found solace in his artwork, and that winter crafted his very first, now iconic, SonicChew medallion using Crayola model magic. Originally decorated with a makeshift chain, this was later replaced with a higher quality necklace he'd bought from the mall. The medallion was intended to serve as a name tag, something that would help him stand out in public. And that December, Chris designed a companion character for SonicChew named Rosechew, a rather blatant derivative of the Sonic character Amy Rose. In August of 2001, Christian began working his first and to date only conventional job. He was hired at the local Wendy's, but had a difficult time maintaining this employment, only lasting approximately a month and a half before being fired. Unlike high school, the employees at the fast food chain were critical of him and made their frustrations known in a very patronizing manner. The exact circumstances of which he was fired are unclear, though there are two incidents often credited as being the last straw. The first claims that Chris was terminated for drawing a picture of an older female coworker as a Pokemon, which they found deeply offensive. The second excuse that Chris told himself involved his attempts to entertain a little boy with his parents, where he performed an impression of the character Donald Duck. This scared the child, causing him to cry. It's approximated that Chris earned around $500 from his employment at Wendy's. In June of 2002, he stopped volunteering as a Pokemon gym leader at the local Toys R Us, opting to play at the locally owned hobby shop known as The Game Place every Friday. As Chris proceeded through college, he began to appreciate all the moments he'd taken for granted back in high school. In February of 2003, he wrote a fond account of his 18th birthday party, a stark contrast to what would happen on his next birthday only 2 weeks later. That year, on his 21st special day, Chris was reading Peter Robinson's Wednesday's Child for an English class. What made this class memorable was that homosexuality had come up during group discussion, something that Chris thought of as revolting at the time due to his religious beliefs. As a result, he made derogatory comments towards homosexuals and was promptly told to leave. What exactly was said has never been revealed, but Chris himself described them as quote-unquote exclamations you'd likely hear from a black person in church. Given the punishment, most surmise his assertions must have been rather severe, and after being told to leave, Chris once again sat by himself and cried. The only difference this time was that there was no one there to comfort him. Whether or not Chris outright quit the class by choice or was forced to leave is unclear, but this would set a bad precedent for the rest of his college career. This incident would mark the beginning of a new saga in Chris's life, one that would lead him not to just be eventually expelled from his college entirely, but to infamy. It was that day, right after he was ejected from English class, that he began his love quest. You see, since he had no one to console him for the first time in his life, it led Chris to realize that he should pursue a romantic relationship, to fill the now empty hole in his emotional support network. But to discover his soulmate, and perhaps even one day bear his child, he had to go back to the drawing board. Throughout April of 2003, Chris began depicting romance using his Sonichu characters. He created the Hedgehogs in Love Pokemon card before quickly succeeding it with the short story Sonichu and Rosechu, the genesis of the Lovehogs. The story ends with Sonichu and Rosechu gazing at the moon before locking eyes and sharing a passionate kiss. But it wasn't until August that his desperation for intimacy began to materialize in the real world. As Chris entered his fourth year at the 2-year community college, he officially began his search for a sweetheart. Rather than ask them out directly though, that month, Chris made his first attraction sign to get the attention of a boyfriend-free girl. On it, the romantically challenged man describes not just himself, but also the qualities he wished for his significant other.
21 and single white male. Shy, smart, young at heart, computer skilled, humorous, a great thinker and go-getter, enjoys good parts of life, diplomatic, peaceful, very creative, he's lonely. Seeking a cute 18 to 21 single female companion who is 18 to 21 years of age and does not already have a boyfriend. Average to slender, body type, white, lives in the Charlottesville or Ruckersville area, does not smoke or drink alcohol, happy, positive personality, average or high income, drives a vehicle. If any man read this huge sign, mind your own business. And to all men with girlfriends, except married and blacks, go jump off a cliff, have a nice day.
For the next 2 months, Chris would tape the sign to the wall of the college's lobby, often waiting somewhere beside it. However, his plans would be thwarted when on October 7th, Mary Lee Walsh, the Dean of Student Services, approached him, confiscated his sign, and bluntly told him to stop. Chris interpreted her authoritative command as very violent, claiming she had exclaimed, "You're not allowed to find true love here." Determined, Chris stubbornly created another attraction sign, only for Mary to confiscate it again a few weeks later. This temporarily led Chris to return to venting his frustrations into his art, at least for the next few months. In November, Chris wrote a poem titled "The Saddest Heart in the World."
And with the Backstreet Boys tune, I sing my lonesome croon. Tell me why I'm stuck as a virgin with rage. Tell me why I so need a cute girl my age. Tell me why I ain't ever wanna hear you say I have a boyfriend.
These lyrics would later be used in the song "So Need a Cute Girl," a track from Christian's cover album Christian and the Hedgehog Boys, which he'd begun recording at the end of that summer. This song would later become a massive hit online, with dozens of covers existing across multiple platforms. But regardless of the quality of his Backstreet Boys parody, Mary Lee Walsh still had a sign. So to occupy Chris's time, he began investing all of his effort playing the game Animal Crossing. This would eventually culminate into what's now known as his Animal Crossing documentary, an hour-long showcase of his in-game village. This would become one of Christian's greatest accomplishments, as he submitted it to the Nintendo Power magazine and managed to actually get featured. Some claim it was the first Let's Play ever made, though this is difficult to prove. On January 1st, 2004, Chris wrote in his diary about his New Year's resolution to get a romantic partner.
My one resolution is to get myself a matching girlfriend. Rather, it will happen as something else. I plan to try again at PVCC.
And try again he did, with his stubbornness only further escalating the conflict. A few weeks into the new year, he wrote a poem titled Hard Love Quest, in which he once again laments being quote-unquote a virgin with rage. Christian's frustration with his lack of romantic success was ever growing. And this new effort to overcome Mary Lee Walsh at PVCC meant trying new strategies. Instead of restraining himself to just carrying signs, the college student now began repurposing his Sonic newsletter into a means of attracting boyfriend-free girls. From this point forward, every newsletter would end with a description of his ideal sweetheart. He includes this disclaimer.
Christian is a very shy and very thoughtful person, and will only accept person-to-person encounters, no emails or phone calls. So if you are interested, they can be found around Piedmont, Virginia Community College or Fashion Square Shopping Center.
In addition to passing around photocopies of his pamphlet, he also began hanging up more attraction signs around school, quickly replacing them whenever torn down. In late January, as Chris stood near his sign per usual, Mary Lee Walsh decided that enough was enough. It was finally time to put an end to his disobedience. According to Chris, she approached him stating that his posters were bothering both her and the student body. Chris responded that he was on his love quest, prompting her to rip the sign from his hands and tear it apart. She then lectured him, stating he would never get a girlfriend this way, before demanding that he stop his behavior immediately. She ended the confrontation by scheduling Chris to attend a meeting to discuss the string of incidents. On February 1st, Chris initiated an email exchange with Miss Walsh, attempting to avoid the meeting through a compromise. He promised her that he wouldn't hang any more signs around campus, so long as she allowed him to continue distributing his newsletter. He also assures that he would move her up his scale of respect by 2 points. About 48 hours later, Miss Walsh would unequivocally deny his request, requiring that they meet the following week. While what exactly occurred during this meeting is uncertain, a few key details are known. At one point, Chris talked with Sonic Chew as if he was real, claiming to Miss Walsh that his character communicated through him. This caused the Dean of Students to talk to Chris quote-unquote rudely and hoarsely. In retaliation, Chris stood up, cupped his hands to his side, and thrusted them forward, miming a powerful beam of energy. He shouted at the top of his lungs his personal variant of a phrase from the anime Dragon Ball Z that he legitimately believed would bring bad luck to the victim. Unsurprisingly, this did little to move Miss Walsh, who declared a ban on not just his attraction sign, but the distribution of his newsletter as well. This enraged Chris to the point where he privately declared war.
Mary Lee Walsh made it illegal to distribute the news dash. I am very angry at that. In response, I plan to incite the masses and hopefully demand the return of the news dash so my chances of getting a girlfriend can be restored.
Adding fuel to the fire was Mary Lee Walsh's attempts to convince Bob and Barbara to remove Chris from the college. Giving them flashbacks to their conflict with Nathaniel Green, they not only refused but became extremely upset. During summer break that year, Chris began exploring more locations to loiter at with his attraction sign. Now dubbing them attraction locations, he began standing at the Charlottesville Fashion Square Mall. This would become the testing ground of a new strategy he'd adopted after watching a lot of anime. Essentially, his plan was to attach a paper heart to a piece of red string, and then throw it at women. He would then reel the string back in, expecting them to follow. Unsurprisingly, in less than a week after conceiving the strategy, his plan was foiled when a mall security guard noticed and confiscated the string from him. This would lead Chris to coin the term jerk cop, later abbreviated to jerk op, to describe store security officers. His next run-in with mall staff would occur 8 weeks into his loitering. This was when the same mall security guard from last time approached him, to which Chris pulled out some of his homemade trading cards that told the story of the Lonesome Virgin. He later bragged about intimidating the officer by shouting "no" directly in his face. Only 5 days later, Chris was approached once again, this time becoming even more belligerent. It escalated to the point of him being detained and forbidden to return from the mall without supervision from his parents. As Chris entered his 5th year at PVCC, he still held resentment towards Miss Walsh in spite of his off-campus pursuits. It was around this point Chris left an inflammatory note for the Dean of Students, expressing his dislike for her. Included was an illustration of an intimidating glare. This, as it would turn out, would be his downfall. Taking into account their previous quarrels, the message was interpreted by the school's administration as a form of harassment. After several hearings deliberating on his fate, the administration ultimately decided it'd be best to temporarily suspend Chris from the campus. Enraged by this development, Bob and Barbara decided to incite the masses themselves, allegedly penning a letter to the White House demanding action. Nothing came of their endeavors, and per the suspension, the criteria for him to return included anger management classes, a psychological evaluation, and social skills counseling. Strangely, it appeared the only reason Chris was upset about his ban was the fact he'd be losing the campus as an attraction zone.
It's been over a week since my suspension. I am depressed, lonely, sad, and bored. I have nowhere to go to attract a boyfriend-free woman. I'll be writing to Santa Claus this year, hoping that he will bring me one.
Whilst all this was going on, Chris became more invested in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, participating in his first tournament at the game place. It was there that he first met Megan Schroeder, an 18-year-old artist who shared many of the same interests as him. They quickly became friends, as she became Chris's first gal pal since leaving high school. Around this time, Chris attended the psychiatric evaluation he was required by PVCC's administration to receive. As of writing, it is the only objective, independent, professional evaluation of Christian as an adult.
Mr. Chandler is a 22-year-old man with a history of developmental delays and autism. Despite these limitations, he seems to have been quite successful in maximizing his academic abilities. Despite his significant delays in language, he has over the years developed relatively effective communication skills. He is left, however, with a severe degree of social awkwardness and seems to have good insight into this. He is left feeling somewhat frustrated as he has a strong desire for companionship, although his social limitations prevent him from being able to realize this in the way in which he would like. He has been on antidepressants for many years, and it is not entirely clear what role they play. Based on the information available at this time, the patient doesn't seem to pose a significant threat to himself or anyone else. There is some suggestion that the anger control has been a problem, although how that has manifested itself is unclear. He certainly has no history of physical violence which would suggest any future risk.
Compared to Christian's state today, this paints a picture of a man that was still, relatively speaking, at the beginning of his descent. A time when he was more lonely than in high school, but still frequently went outside and had modest social interaction at the game place. It's worth noting that the examiner concluded that Chris should receive further treatment, advice that his parents seemed to ignore. With a tumultuous home life accompanied by years of a society Chris felt he was weighed down by, the self-described virgin with rage decided to yet again pick up his pen. With all he had learned and experienced, it was at this point he would create what is now seen as his magnum opus, the Sonic Chew comics. Not only did this series become his masterpiece, but more importantly brought attention his way. While up until this point he was known only by those in his local vicinity, soon enough a little image board would stumble upon his work, and in the process make internet history, as Christian Weston Chandler becomes possibly the most notable person in the history of the World Wide Web.
Good, feels good.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? What would you like to do? I mean, you guys like maybe want to go to McDonald's or something like that, or we could hang out in the gazebo maybe.
Well, it's dark out now, so might not be able to see the gazebo.
That's true.
But I can point out it's behind the house, and you know where the pen is, the green at the fence, right at that's alongside the road there.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, well, anyway, you're driving down Westwood,
right?
And you look to your right. You will see a doghouse before you see the pen. The gazebo is behind the doghouse.
Gotcha. Okay. Here we go. We got the gazebo, and then I guess
gazebo's over here.
Watch your step. This is your light source. I'm the light source.
Yes.
All right.
It's a good place to
It's
hang
a very
out
low
here.
gazebo. Yeah, it is.
You gotta watch your head if you're more than.
So I'm able to stand barely, but at 5'10".
If you're Brad Garrett, you would have to hunch down.
Yeah.
He's like more than 6 feet.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Here, watch your step.
So Christine, do any of your neighbors know about Chris Chan and everything that goes on online?
Among which, yes.
Have the trolls ever harassed them?
Not that I'm aware of. I pray they haven't. Anyway, Hi guys. I'll walk y'all back to your vehicles.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I'll walk y'all back to your Autobots. Huh?